Hello, SPED 2010 students. I hope everyone had a great week last week. So, this week we are working on week 12. We are still in module 4. So, I just wanted to kind of let you see before we got into week 12 where we are in terms of the rest of the semester. So, as you know, classes for spring end on the 26th of April. So, that means that April 29th through May 2nd is going to be our finals week. So, we're getting really close to the end of the semester. So, I just wanted to let you see kind of where we are in a look ahead. This week we are in week 12, and then after that, the week of the April 15th, we will do week 13, and we will finish out week 14 on the week of April 22nd. Then we have our last test exam. You do not have a comprehensive exam over everything. You only will be having your last exam will be your final. So the exam over module 4, your quiz 3 will be your final exam. I will send something else, a video about that when it's closer to time, talking to you about the exam and then finishing up your post-test and course feedback for this course. So that will be a separate video coming soon. But I just wanted to give you a look into where we're at for the next few weeks to finish out this semester. So let's go ahead and concentrate on this week, week 12. So this week, we're really diving into how do we support all students. Now remember, in an inclusive classroom, we're really thinking about students who are at disadvantage. We're thinking of those who maybe have some learning disabilities, or we're looking at those who we'd like to refer to get tested for special education services. But we can't really do that if we're not looking at all aspects. So this week we're going to be looking at significant disproportionality in special education. So basically, what is that? And considering culture before referral. And within that, we're also going to be discussing what BICS and CALP is and how that plays a role in the classroom. So, our objectives this week is to really look at the impacts of culture, like cultural and linguistic differences, and how that impacts learning. So I have given you plenty of resources to kind of connect to the content. I have an article on Bix and Calps that you're going to be reading. There is your last RAD, which is going to be consider culture before referral. So this is something that you could do if you want. So remember that make sure at this point you've had four RADs completed because that last one should be turned in. We also have an audio for you to listen to that kind of goes over how you identify ELLs with special needs and what the signs are. And there's a worksheet to kind of help gauge your understanding. Now, remember, this worksheet you're not submitting, it's just to kind of help you gauge your understanding of identifying ELLs who maybe have special needs. What are the signs and how can you assist and support them before you decide to refer them to get tested for special education? We do have a discussion board that you're going to be completing on culture. There is an assignment there that's worth 10 points. So that's how you're going to be graded this week. Also, you will be submitting your co-teaching presentations. Those are due. Some people have already submitted those. I'm in the process of grading those. So once the co-teaching presentations and lesson plans have been graded, I will email you. But they are due Thursday. Excuse me, not Thursday, Sunday, April 14th, because I gave us an extension on the original deadline. So just keep in mind that's going to be due on Sunday. Something else that's due this week besides your assignment is going to be your written analysis for service learning. Now, in here, I have the date of Thursday, April 11th. I'd like to stick to that date. For those of you that may have just finished up and you didn't submit your service learning closing documents or maybe completed your service learning journals, those need to be submitted as well. Because when I'm grading your written analysis and I'm grading your journals, I grade them together because this is a project. There's several components to the service learning. There's your evaluation part where you were evaluated by your mentor teacher. There is the journal reflection component. Then there's the written analysis paper, which is also reflection. And all of these components together make up this project for service learning. So I'm grading them all together. It's a lot of pieces. That's why it takes me time to grade these big projects. So if you've already turned it in and you're like, why haven't I got a grade back? It takes time for me to grade these, but I will email you once yours has been graded. So if you haven't submitted the service learning journal, that should be completed and submitted to Dropbox, as well as turning in your written analysis on April the 11th. Also, a reminder, there's some people that still haven't completed some RADs. Remember, there's 4 that are to be submitted to the discussion board, so just keep that in mind. Now, in addition to those assessments, I want you to think about your objective for this week. I want you to think about the key words and concepts that we're really focusing on in the classroom. We're looking at English language learners and that barrier to learning. We're looking at culture and how that impacts learning. And we're also looking at BICS and CALP and what vital role that plays in the classroom and instruction. So these are things I really want us to concentrate on this week. So what kind of resources I've laid out for you, I'm going to show you that will help you. The first thing you're going to be doing after you read the introduction, overview, and keywords is really looking at the textbook. The textbook is going to help make connections. So you're going to be reading chapter 3 in Exceptional Learners textbook. This is really going to focus on diversity, inclusion, and how that plays a role impacts with culture and ELL and English language learners specifically, and how that will impact your teaching and also learners in your classroom. The article that I have for you is really going into depth of what BICS in CALP is. What does it stand for? What does it mean? And how we approach these in the classroom. So BICS stands for Basic Interpersonal Communicative Skills, right? And then CALP stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. So the easiest way to explain it is Basic Interpersonal Communicative Skills, or BICS. The acronym is BICS. BICS is really talking about just having those normal communication skills, right? Basically, a conversation. So if you had a student named Daniel, right? Um, and he is ELL, or not very fluent, he's an English language learner, you're going to teach him some common words and phrases in those ways so he can communicate simple things, right? Answering simple questions where there is a continued communication, right? So that's the first thing. CALP is a little bit more in depth. So, CALP is that cognitive academic language, right? So, this is a little bit more difficult because when we're talking about cognitive academic language, say you're reading a section in a book and you are an ELA, language arts. If the student doesn't have that background knowledge and they don't understand the terms and meaning and there's that language barrier, if they don't understand the academic language, they can't understand the content. They don't get the context behind it. They can't read through, they can't inference. Those things are important. So when they're faced with academic work, it's going beyond basic communicative skills. It's going beyond that BICS. It's a little more in depth when we're thinking about CALP. Okay, so this article is really walking you through. When you're thinking about BICS and CALP, think about it as this matrix here, right? It's basically a continuum, it's not linear, right? So we're going from context embedded, right? Things they can understand within the context, to context reduced, where we're going to support them, giving them clues, information. When we're thinking about BICS and CALP, all these things matter because when we're communicating, we look for clues. We look at facial gestures. We use clues to help them, maybe real objects, pictures, so they can gain that understanding, those linguistic cues that we want them to embed in their language and understand meanings about the language. But when we're talking about it being cognitively demanding, or a little bit deeper, we're really trying to look at what kind of activities could you do that's going to support them, right? When they have more demanding tasks, right? So when we're looking at this, cognitively undemanding to demanding, and remember, it's very fluid as it moves throughout and it's not linear. We have to think about those supports. So here's some examples. When we're thinking about BICS, those communicative piece where you're socializing with others, we need to have more face to face conversation so they can look at your facial gestures, right? That would be the best way to embed that context of how you mean something, what you look like. It's a little bit easier to understand someone. But if you are on the telephone having a conversation, that makes it a little bit more demanding, right? So it's a little bit harder, but it's better. But when we're looking at what being more demanding, think about the student who may be an English language learner that's taking a standardized test, right? Or maybe in biology or science, they're demonstrating with experiments. Imagine how demanding that would be. Think about the cognitive language behind that, right? So it's a little more about conceptualizing them and thinking about their bilingual proficiency, right? And think about how long it takes them to get where they need to be. So for bilingual learners or English language learners to really achieve a level of academic linguistics and be proficient in that, we really have to think about how you are teaching and instructing and what kind of supports do they have with their peers and with you, right? So we give you some examples here to really talk about the difference and maybe some examples of maybe things you didn't think about in the class to support them. So Bix really think about oral communication, conversations, social cues. Think about their background, right? How to comprehend language. So what we want to look at is having them observe nonverbal behaviors like facial expressions, looking in people's eyes, any kind of gestures, observing how people react to certain things, and fluctuations in voice cues, phrasing, stressing things to them, using pictures or real objects to help them to present those contextual clues. And think about repeating things often. All of these things help with those BICs, those basic interpersonal communication skills. But when we're talking about students specifically in the academic language sense, we have to go a step beyond. Remember, it's more demanding, right? We got to reduce the language, context reduce the language, mean make it easier for them. Remember, it takes 5 to 7 years for English language learners to become proficient in the language of academics in the classroom. This is harder. There's no verbal cues. There's less face to face interaction. Okay. Often the language is very abstract and difficult. Think about reading narrative or expository texts. A lot of times, this is a level beyond what they're at. And the cultural linguistic knowledge really has to be fully comprehended to be able to apply it in other areas. So, when we do this, we have to go back to this matrix, right? Thinking about how we can support them. Think about the written and spoken world that we live in, right? How they interact with each other. What kind of clues do they have? How do they construct meaning? And use that when it's supposed to be there for them to understand and comprehend language, right? So we know that CALP is more demanding. We know the textbooks are harder. We look at novels and lectures or doing tests. So this is very hard for them to understand. So we have to think of how can we support them in the classroom? Is it something deeper? Do they need to be tested for special education services, or is it a language barrier? These are the things that we have to look at and understand so we can support them. I have a video here that talks about sheltered instruction and how this plays a role. This is a really great video because it really shows you how to support English language learners with common meanings and words by using real objects to help them. So that video is there for you as well. Now, as far as a presentation is, I have provided you with a Nearpod presentation. This Nearpod presentation talks a lot more about BICs and CALPs and English language learners and how to support them. There's a link here, or you can join at join.nearpod.com with the code. So there's two ways for you to join, and in that is an embedded quiz to give you feedback to see how well you're doing with this section. I have also provided you with additional resources. So remember, resources are there to help you connect deeper to the content. So there is a IRIS module here that is about what you as a teacher need to do to help support students who are just learning to speak English. Now, there's not an assessment or a worksheet that you will submit, because remember, how I'm assessing you this week is going to be through that discussion. But this is really just an extra way for you to gain a deeper understanding to support students who are English language learners in your room. So I would recommend going through that IRIS module. So that's your additional resource available for you. Now, as I mentioned, you will be assessed several ways this week. For your homework assignment, you will be completing a culture video discussion. Okay, so when you click on it, you're going to see a video comes up. Okay, there's a link to the discussion board. You're going to watch the video and then you're going to complete the culture discussion. So the culture discussion really is answering questions about the video. So the two questions I want you to really think about as you're watching the video is, how does culture really impact behavior in the classroom? And what cultural factors really affect your teaching? So these are things I want you to answer, these two questions, and you're going to respond to at least two other classmates in the discussion board. So that's your assessment for this week 12. Now, I also mentioned that you will be completing and submitting your presentations, so your co-teaching strategy. That is due Sunday, April 14th. So please make sure you complete that. And then also your service learning written analysis paper is due April 11th. So please make sure you submit that. All right, guys, so that completes all of week 12. I hope everyone has a great week. And remember, if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out. I'll be more than glad to meet with you virtually, in person. Just be sure to reach out if you are struggling or having any questions to do with the written analysis or anything for the content this week. All right, guys, I hope you have a great week. And until next time, take care.